So I've been thinking about doing a review for this movie ever since I saw it, and since it's been about a week since it came out, I figure let the spoilers fly. Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, Deadpool and Wolverine just came out. It's the newest Deadpool movie. It's the third Deadpool movie, technically. I mean, I guess you could consider X-Men Origins Wolverine a Deadpool movie, but I think everyone just wants to forget about that, especially Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. So we'll just call this the third Deadpool movie, and this is the big return of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. After Logan, he said he was retired, and he said he'd never put the suit back on, he'd never be Wolverine again. But if we're being honest, as perfect as that ending in Logan was for Hugh Jackman's whole Wolverine career, we kind of knew that wasn't going to last, at least because we knew that Deadpool was always pushing for a Wolverine crossover, even since his first movie, a movie that by all rights shouldn't have even been made. They made so many jabs at Hugh Jackman, at Wolverine, that you kind of knew that it was coming. You kind of felt it in the wind that eventually you get Hugh Jackman, Wolverine, and Deadpool in a movie together. And now it's here. We have that movie. And I gotta say, this movie is a lot of fun. It's hilarious. It's great action. It's all the things you'd want in a Deadpool Wolverine crossover. However, I'm gonna get the negatives out of the way first. Now, my first negative is the actual plot of this movie. It's not a perfect movie. It's actually a little disjointed at times, and it runs a little bit long. I think it just barely overstays its welcome, but I'm kind of flip-flopping on that because on the one hand, there is a lot of cool stuff in the movie that does pad out the runtime, but it's cool stuff. Now, is it all necessarily relevant to the plot? No. Are the jokes funny? Yes. And are they creative? Double yes. So I can't really say I'd want them cut. It's just that the movie does run a little bit long, especially when we get into the third act. You do start to feel it a little bit more. My other issue is with the actual construction of the plot. The actual narrative drive is a little flimsy, and I'm not a huge fan of these multiverse stories. I feel like as we introduce more multiverse concepts, the stakes tend to drop, and with a character like Deadpool, who you know can't die, and now we have two. We have Deadpool and Wolverine, who both can't die. Where are the stakes? And the movie tries to give us some stakes because the whole universe is collapsing, but this movie is so meta that you can kind of just see the TVA as the Marvel executives, as the people that make the decision to continue one universe and cancel another universe. And so in that sense, we know that the Fox universe of X-Men movies is dying. We know it's gonna die. We know it's gonna end. So this idea to save that universe, even if Deadpool's kind of found family are all in there and he cares about them, you don't want to see them gone, but at the same time, you know that universe has to die anyway. So are the stakes really that high? I'm not entirely sure. And that's just a hang up of these multiversal stories. You have endless variations of other characters. So if one dies, another one can just replace him. That's the whole concept of how they got Wolverine in this movie. He's not the Hugh Jackman Wolverine that we know from the classic X-Men movies or even from Logan. This is another variant of someone that has a bit of a darker backstory, and kind of like Logan, he let down the X-Men and they all died, and now he's carrying that guilt and shame. He's got all this baggage, and that again plays as the perfect straight man to Deadpool's wacky antics and always running his mouth. And here we have a Wolverine that's very jaded and cynical, and they just work so well off of each other. But again, going back to the negatives, trying to get them all out of the way, this plot construction really leaves a bit to be desired because it does kind of meander. You're lost in this wasteland for a lot of the movie. There's a lot of needless montages and cameos. So again, just as a narrative, as a plot, this doesn't really have much. And this is weirdly a trend that I've been seeing with the past two Deadpool movies. The first Deadpool movie had a great, very solid plot. It was funny. It broke the fourth wall. There were a lot of jokes, but at the same time, they had a narrative thrust. It was Wade and his relationship and his origin story. So you do have a bit more of a concrete revenge quest going on right there. And then in Deadpool 2, you still have more or less a mission. You're trying to save this kid from turning into a monster pyromaniac in the future, and Cable's there, but you can already see the chinks in the armor start to form. That one with all the time travel shenanigans, and it does reduce the sense of urgency for the mission. And here, it's just the next step of that. There is a ticking clock, so I can't say there's no stakes, but it's mostly just a buddy road trip movie through this Mad Max wasteland for the vast majority of the movie, so you don't really feel it that much. You're really just there to see Wolverine and Deadpool bounce off of each other, create good chemistry, and have some good jokes and some funny moments and some good cameos, and then you're on your way. But I feel like most people coming into this movie aren't coming for a cohesive plot, a mission to save the universe or save whatever. They're really here because of the title. We have Deadpool and Wolverine in a movie together, and as far as that goes, it's fantastic. They work great off of each other. Hugh Jackman brings his A game. There's actually quite a few moments here where Hugh Jackman actually is allowed to flex his acting chops a little bit. He cries, he gets emotional. He has some pretty somber moments, and Deadpool, well, I don't know if Deadpool has a somber bone in his body because it's Deadpool, but you know, the jokes work. And when Deadpool is on, when he's got the mask on and he's going full Deadpool, it works. Weirdly enough, when he's got the mask off and in the beginning of the movie when he's doing his 9-to-5 job and he's with his little found family having a birthday party, those jokes don't really work all that well for me. It feels like they're a little bit more cringy, and I don't know, that sense of humor just wasn't clicking with me. But then once he puts on the mask and he goes to the TVA and he goes to the Void, all that works so much better. And now we gotta talk about some of the cameos that are in this movie, because the first big set of cameos in this movie is when Deadpool is looking for his Wolverine, because his timeline's deteriorating because Wolverine died and they need a new anchor being, which in this universe is Wolverine. So he's got to pluck a Wolverine from another universe and drop him in here, and everything will be saved. The problem is Wolverines across the multiverse don't really want to work with Deadpool, so we get a really hilarious montage of him looking for various versions of Wolverine, and we see some great homages to classic comic book art. We see the classic yellow and brown suit, and we see him bring out his claws with a reflection of the Hulk in there, just like that classic, I think it was Todd McFarlane Wolverine comic that he did. And we also have another comic book cover homage with Wolverine up on this big X looking crucified with all the skulls underneath him, and he's just hallucinating, going crazy, being tortured on this thing. And Deadpool pops in, and what's really cool here is that even the lighting mirrors the comic book cover. With the Hulk Wolverine thing, they had to kind of fake it a little bit because it doesn't exactly look like it, but this one with Wolverine on the big X, that looks exactly like the cover. It's really impressive what they're able to do. And we have just a couple other fun variants of Wolverine. We have Patch at the casino, and we have the Calvolrine. We have Henry Cavill as Wolverine, but Henry Cavill as Wolverine is looking really cool. For the couple seconds that we see him in this movie, he kind of sold me on the concept. But it doesn't stop there. We got Age of Apocalypse Wolverine with the one hand and the big old hair and big mutton chops, looking great. And then last but not least, we have the short, comic book accurate height Wolverine, which is just Hugh Jackman just scaled down a little bit. And I really wish they didn't completely scale him down like they did here, because that looked kind of fake. I kind of wish they had kept him kind of big and beefy, but then as soon as he hopped off that stool, he was just short. I think that would have been a little bit funnier. It would have looked a little more realistic, because this kind of midget version of Wolverine just, I don't know, something about the proportions just didn't look right. But needless to say, after that montage, I was locked into this movie. I was getting all the references. I was having a great time. I thought it was funny. Deadpool and Wolverine get kicked into the void, and I was like, all right, this is when the movie's gonna slow down a little bit. And we see the crumpled 20th Century Fox logo in the background, and I'm like, all right, so maybe the void won't be as boring as I thought it might be, because this is where all the characters from the various universes just go to die. The ones that don't belong, the variants that need to be cleaned up, they go here. And the first person we meet in the void is Chris Evans, as presumed to be Captain America, and they're setting it up to be Captain America until he says flame on, and you realize, oh no, this is Chris Evans' Human Torch from the Fox Fantastic Four movies. And when he said flame on, I was a little disappointed in myself that I didn't catch on to that sooner, because this is the Fox universe and this is where all the Fox characters go to die. So of course it would be the Human Torch, and Captain America never went to the void. He just went back in time to put the Infinity Stones back and then became super old. So he's still in the MCU. He's just old man Steve instead of young Steve. So thinking back on it, I should have known it was the Human Torch, but watching the movie, it did catch me by surprise, and it was a welcomed reunion of sorts, because I actually didn't mind those Fantastic Four movies. Sure, they're not great, and probably the worst sin is what they did with Doctor Doom in those movies, but you can see my Revenge of the Remakes video on the Human Torch to get my full thoughts on those movies, because while they're not good, they're not as bad as some of the other attempts either. They're pretty middle-of-the-road comic book fare for that era. But the cameos don't stop there, because we meet our villain of the movie, Cassandra Nova, who's Professor X's twin sister, and she's got these really weird telekinetic psychic powers. It's never fully explained what she can do. She's just this kind of all-powerful Omega level mutant that just can do whatever she wants, and she's in charge. And the cameos really come through with her henchmen, all the people that work for Cassandra. We see, I think, Lady Deathstrike, we see Pyro, we see Toad, Sabretooth, but we also get some non-X-Men specific cameos. We see that big Russian from the Thomas Jane Punisher movie that I honestly forgot that movie existed. I hadn't really thought about it in a while, but it was welcome to see this guy, and they do reference the Punisher. They said that he's not with us anymore, that he did die, but he was part of this like resistance group, so that's cool. But the real heavy duty cameos come in with this resistance, the people that are in the void, these heroes that go against Cassandra Nova that Deadpool and Wolverine need to team up with. And these are the biggest surprises in the movie. Now, we kind of already knew, or kind of had a feeling that X-23 was going to be in this movie, or at least I did. I always had a hunch that, okay, we're going to get an X-23 cameo because this is going to spoof on Logan a lot. But she's part of this resistance. She helps them out. She gets a lot of good lines. She actually gives Wolverine a great pep talk about how he's never been the right guy for the job. He just always has to make himself the right guy. He always has to make himself better. And that is a through line through all of Hugh Jackman's appearances as Wolverine. He's always played it as this guy that doesn't fit in. He's not really an X-Man, but he kind of wants to be, and he finds a home there, and so he kind of makes himself better. And that's really the Wolverine arc from the comics. It's a Wolverine arc from the movies. It's very Wolverine, and I'm so glad that he got that pep talk in this movie before the character just became retired. But some of the characters that you may not have expected to show up in this movie is Elektra, played by Jennifer Garner, which, okay, that's quite the throwback, and I'm glad that we got to see her again, because she was pretty good as Elektra. Even though her two movies, Elektra and Daredevil, aren't the best in execution, she was still good in them, and she can swing the sai around like nobody's business, and again, she does that here, and it looks really cool. And we also get Blade, played by Wesley Snipes, and this was a great callback, because there would be no Marvel universe, there would be no Fox universe, there would be no Marvel superhero franchise period if it wasn't for the success of Blade. Blade proved that you could take comic book characters, ground them, and turn them into great big box office draws. Even though Blade was a rated R vampire movie, it surpassed that classic horror genre and gave it more of a comic book flair and made people really open up to the idea that these comic book characters could work in movies. So I'm so glad we got him back. And yeah, there's a lot of funny jokes that he says and that Deadpool says at his expense, and stuff like, oh, there's only going to be one Blade, because I guess Marvel's Blade plan is just falling apart with Mahershala Ali, and I don't really know what the status is, but based on what Wesley Snipes says in this movie, he says there's only ever going to be one Blade. So maybe they're just scrapping the whole project. I don't know. And then last but not least, we have Gambit. And it's not Gambit from X-Men Origins Wolverine. This is Channing Tatum Gambit. And if you thought that the Calverine cameo was a little bit of a reach, because he was never actually Wolverine, it was just a fan casting online that really picked up speed, Channing Tatum as Gambit is more or less in that same vein. Although instead of a fan cast, this was actually Channing Tatum wanting to be Gambit in a Gambit movie, to the point where this movie was going into development. Fox had big plans. Around the time Days of Future Past was coming out, they were planning out what their next slate of big movies was. They wanted to compete with Marvel and DC, so they were pumping out all these different ideas for different X-Men spin-offs and one-offs, and Gambit was one of them, and Channing Tatum was the face of that, and everybody, including myself, really wanted to see what that would look like. And when he walked out, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. This was so cool to see, and at the same time, completely ridiculous. Now, I have no idea what the plans were for his costume in that movie, but this is comic accurate Remy LeBeau. Looks like it was plucked straight out of the X-Men cartoon. And while the inner fanboy in me just loved the fact that they gave him that outfit and that they gave him that ridiculous accent, because that is comic book accurate, that is how he sounds, I do still understand that this probably would not have worked in its own movie, because it does sound ridiculous. And Deadpool is just ruthless on this guy with his accent, and it's hilarious. It's probably some of the biggest laughs out of the movie that it got from me. And like I said before, this movie is not very big on plot, but where this movie does go after they team up with these resistance guys, they go to take out Cassandra Nova, find a way out. It actually kind of works, and they go back to Deadpool's universe, but he's not alone because now we have this army of variant Deadpools trying to stop Cassandra Nova and the TVA's master plan of just erasing their universe. And this action scene is a lot of fun, not just because it's the wanton violence and gore and just stabbing and shooting that you would want from a Deadpool Wolverine team up going against an army of various Deadpools, and there are some really cheeky Deadpool references to different variants of Deadpool in the comics, and if you're looking closely you can find them, and they are there. But what really is the crowd pleaser moment in this one, at least for me, was that Wolverine finally flips up his cowl and you get that classic Wolverine mask, and of course there's jokes about it and it's funny, but it still doesn't stop just the beautiful Wolverine iconography that we get with him in the mask, just slicing and dicing all these Deadpools. It's a great sequence, and he keeps that mask on until pretty much the end of the movie. The reactor that they're trying to supercharge gets destroyed. Wolverine's shirt gets destroyed too in another fan servicey moment where Hugh Jackman's showing off his physique like he does in every X-Men movie and every appearance that he's been in. I'm pretty sure there has not been an X-Men or Wolverine movie where he has not had a shirtless or completely naked scene. I guess the fan service isn't just for us dudes, it's also for the women in the audience. And that's pretty much the movie. The day is saved, Wolverine has a new home, and X-23 is there, and they're having their birthday party celebration or whatever again, and it's just a happy ending all around. But it does open the question of, is Hugh Jackman gonna be retired after this, or is Disney gonna pull him back in just like how they just pulled Robert Downey Jr. back in to make even more of these? And I really hope that they don't. I really hope they just let this lie as a one-off and more or less ignore this franchise. I think this is a great wrap-up for the Deadpool trilogy. As far as Fox X-Men trilogies go, they really haven't had a winning trilogy. Usually they'll have a good couple movies, and then the third or fourth one will just crap the bed. It happened with the first trilogy. It happened with the Days of Future Past First Class trilogy. And I really was concerned that it would happen here, but it didn't. They stuck the landing with this one, and I hope that they just let it lie. Even so, I just wish that if Marvel were to bring in the X-Men, they wouldn't just pluck them from another universe. I really hope that they would build them from the ground up, and they can reuse some actors, but for the sake of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, I think we're done. Right? Like, let me know in the comments if you want to see Hugh Jackman in more Wolverine roles, or if you think that, okay, he served his time. Give the guy a break. Bring in someone else like Henry Cavill or Karl Urban. Karl Urban has always been on my list for potential Wolverines. I think he would be fantastic. But those are pretty much all my thoughts on Deadpool and Wolverine. It's a fantastic movie. It's a hilarious movie. I'm so glad I saw it. I really haven't been that impressed with the MCU lately, so I'm glad that this one really feels like a classic Deadpool story, even though it is Deadpool, Wolverine, and they're bringing in X-Men and all that universe shenanigans. But it does still feel like the same sense of humor that you've come to expect from the first two Deadpool movies, now just with a different straight man. It's Wolverine and Hugh Jackman and all the great potential of jokes that come with that and come with the Fox merger of Disney. It's all there, and it made me laugh. But whatever you think, let me know in the comments, and if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And as always, I'm Colby, this is my Nerdy Talk, and I'll see you in the next video.